Thank you. So my name is Betsy. This is Noam. Hi, everybody. We really appreciate you for being here tonight. And if you haven't registered or write your name down in front, we encourage you to write your name down so you can get an email whenever we have another event like this. So tonight it's about the growing up fatherless, and we have Karen with us. I'm the executive and signing officer for Women Issues Awareness on York University campus. And I'll encourage you to go on our Facebook also and add and encourage other people to come and join as well. And also would like to.
Well, yeah, so I wanted to give just like a little bit of perspective. I'm Noam, as Betty said a minute ago, and I run the Students in Support of Free Speech actually at York University as well. And we started MIA together here because, me particularly, because I understand that this is a really, not only is it an integral issue that everyone should be caring about, but it is a free speech issue as well. And something that displayed that to me quite clearly was last night, I was postering for this event, putting up posters, at York University as one would. And while I was putting up a poster, an individual just walked up right in front of me and tore it down in front of my face and ignored me as if I didn't exist. He walked by my friend and I while we were postering and tore down a few more as well. And we had no idea how to deal with that situation. We were so dumbfounded that somebody would just walk up and have the gall to do it in front of us. And it just solidified further that this issue is something that we need to bring to York University, and these voices need to be heard. So we'd like to introduce Ms. Karen Strawn, our speaker today. She will discuss the consequences of growing up fatherless and how we can empower fathers and other male role models to do better for their children. And a little bit of background on her. She has devoted the last 7 years to developing an understanding of the social, cultural, psychological, and biological dynamics behind gender role enforcement and sexual politics. Her YouTube channel, Girl Writes What, has over 180,000 subscribers and more than 16 million video views. And her work has been presented in high school and university classrooms in the US, Canada, and Ireland. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and without further ado, Karen Strawn.
Thank you, Karen.
All right.
Okay, hi everyone. You can all hear me? Okay. First off, I'm talking about fatherlessness, and that's something that it can happen a variety of ways. So it can happen through divorce and family court situation where a man's parental rights aren't particularly respected. It can happen from a woman choosing to start a family without a male partner, and it can happen through a mother being widowed. So there are a lot of different ways that this can happen, and not all of them are avoidable. But with that said, and also please bear with me if my voice is a little touchy. I had an altercation with some walnuts yesterday, and I'm still not quite there back where I need to be yet. So, to begin, there is a word in British slang that's been around since about the mid-19th century. It describes a particular group of people. Chavvy is the word. And the group it described was a perceived, unruly, boorish, criminally oriented, economically unproductive, antisocial underclass of youth. And it was particularly associated with young men. And it derived from the Romani word chavi, meaning child. Its definition within its modern iteration, chav, is considered by etymologists to be a backronym. It's a constructed acronym that's been put together to fit an existing word. In this case, the backronym CHAV means council housed and violent, While there were no council houses back in the 1860s, the word now effectively means exactly the same thing. Back when it was popularized, synonyms might be hoodlum, lout, goon, delinquent, hooligan, gangster, punk, thug. These words all conjure similar images. Young, male, violent, angry, uneducated, unmotivated, and unproductive, of poor moral character, antisocial, and economically stunted. But chav and its backronym status within the modern parlance might prove to be insightful. Council housing as a major public works project began at the end of World War I, providing solid, spacious, safe, and affordable housing primarily to poor and struggling veterans and their families. Over the course of a little more than half a century, council housing morphed into cheap, subsidized housing almost exclusively for single mothers and their children. How interesting, then, that it was only after the Oxford English Dictionary made chav its first ever word of the year back in 2004, a few decades after council housing had become men deserts filled with single mothers and fatherless children, that people began to spread the myth that chav actually stands for council housed and violent, and that this myth has stuck in the collective consciousness as something that's actually true. And just so the ladies don't feel left out, there's a feminized version of the word, chavette, just in case anyone was thinking I'm not equal opportunity. So what does chav tell us? Noting that the statistics, nothing that the statistics don't. According to Civitas UK, being raised without a father leads to a 5 to 32 times greater chance of a whole host of social maladies, including but not limited to going to prison, committing suicide, having behavioral problems, becoming a rapist, running away from home, abusing drugs and alcohol, and dropping out of high school. Other sources indicate similar risks regarding opting out of post-secondary education, having sex early, contracting an STI, being incarcerated or institutionalized as a juvenile, being physically or sexually abused, becoming a victim of street violence, becoming a perpetrator of violence, having children outside of a relationship, and becoming a teen parent. One study in Britain in the 1990s found that children were up to 33 times more likely to suffer abuse from a live-in boyfriend or stepfather than from their biological dad. The modern definition of chav as council-housed and violent appears to be the result of a collective intuition based on the layperson's observation of what happens when children, particularly boys, are increasingly deprived of the day-to-day meaningful influence of fathers. And I'm using the UK as an example here because there's no racial complication here to muddy the water. Only 3% of the British population are black. The vast majority of young men referred to as chavs in the UK are in fact white, and a recent survey reveals that young white men, out of all identifiable groups, have the worst public approval rating of anyone. Perceptions of white men in their 20s in Britain were in fact less than half as favorable as the least next popular group, Black Caribbean men, and less than 1/3 as positive as Pakistani men born in their 20s. Scores were based on people's perceptions of pro and antisocial traits among different populations. Pro-social meaning things like being polite, helping others, being productive, being intelligent, being honest, and working hard. And antisocial meaning things like being violent, getting drunk, being sexually irresponsible, stealing, being dishonest, and using illegal drugs. You know, all those things that are correlated with growing up without a dad. These scores jive with actual real-world statistics on NEETs, NEET standing for Not in Education, Employment, or Training, while young white women and young white men in the UK are at the moment roughly equally likely to be considered NEET. The majority of the former are NEET and raising kids out of wedlock. A significant portion of the latter are NEET and raising cane. And whether you're a chav, a chavette, or a single mother raising little future chavs, you're more likely to have yourself been raised in a household without a father. Wash, rinse, repeat. Does every fatherless family result in disaster for the children? No. There are tons of kids who grow up without their dads who manage to sidestep most or even all of the negative consequences associated with fatherlessness. But I want you all to consider this, and this is what lets me sleep at night as a lifelong smoker. Fewer than 10% of us will ever get lung cancer. Even so, the risk of lung cancer is 30 times higher than in people who have never smoked. And our governments in the West have put a lot of money and effort into discouraging smoking, with varying results depending on how stubborn the person is, because they see it as damaging to individual health and to wider society. Not only do they pour money into awareness of the fact that it's a health risk, they've increased regulation of this legal product and applied serious financial disincentives in the form of sin taxes and placed strict limits on how it can be distributed and where and in what circumstances it can be consumed. And yet our governments, despite advocates, think tanks, and lobby groups on both sides of the political aisle, increasingly sounding the alarm over the problem of fatherlessness, they continue to fail to take any substantive action. Certainly, fewer than 10% of children in fatherless homes will run away from home as a child. But they're still 35 times more likely to do so than a kid with both parents. So, our governments in the West just continue to ignore the problem, and not just ignore it, but tolerate it and subsidize it. They subsidize the ongoing creation of fatherless families.